Procedural scaffolding includes model to practice. That's where the teacher is actually modeling a question or perhaps some intonation, and then students practice with partners. So, for example, how you doing today? How you doing today? Everyone ask your partners, how you doing today? How you doing today? How you doing today? Okay, they get the practice from the model. TSST, the teacher asks a question to S1. S1 answers the question and asks the same question to S2. S2 answers the question and asks the same question to the teacher. Now, I find that TSST works best with easier, less complex questions because you're not giving them time to think. You're jumping right to S1. Okay? If it's a thinker, if it's something you prefer that they practice before they share with the class, then that's when I would prefer pair work to group work, pair work or group work to S1. In other words, they talk in pairs or they talk in a group, and then you call on one student. Now, this is important because they had practice time, they had rehearse time, they had a chance to really think about what they're going to say. Speaking of thinking, next we have think, pair, share. Think, pair, share. Now, this is very important because, as we mentioned in the teacher wait time part, students need time to think in order to produce quality output. So they think to themselves for a while, and then they talk to a partner, and then they share with the whole class. Now, a little note here, in some of our students' lesson plans, they would say, oh, this interaction was TPS. However, that TPS never included instructions to think. You have to explicitly tell them we're going to think first. And that means think silently, and that means no talking, and that means classroom management on the part of the teacher to make sure people aren't talking, whether it's a micro-teaching or real class. So instruct them to think. And by the way, 30 seconds is usually not enough time, so give them at least a minute. Okay. TWPS is similar to think, pair, share, except you have that additional step of writing. This is great because the thinking and the writing gives them more time to process and articulate what they're going to say and share with the class, and also you're involving that additional skill of writing. Okay. Next is GPS, group, pair, solo, where big group works on something together and then break into pairs and work on it, and then individuals work on it on their own. Now, I find this works best with projects that can be broken down into separate parts. Like a big project, everybody works together. You break it up into separate parts for pairs, and then even smaller parts for individuals. And so you get that time in the big group, time with one partner, and time by yourself. Guiding questions to complex questions. Keep in mind, this one is only for intermediates and above. Guiding questions to complex questions. And try to keep those complex questions complex. That's why they're called that. So, for example, let's say you start with, oh, okay, does everyone have a best friend? Okay, tell me about your best friend. Okay, what should a best friend be? What are the characteristics of a best friend? And so you would hear like, oh, loyalty. A best friend is loyal. Okay. Friendly. A best friend is friendly. And how about generous? A best friend is generous with their time and their resources or whatever. Okay. Now, you could say, okay, why is that important? But that's not much more complex. What if you said, okay, now let's take these qualities of a best friend. Now, which quality would be most important if you are, for example, held hostage somewhere? Do you want the generous friend? Or do you want the loyal friend? Huh? Which quality would be more important if you are suddenly in a world where nobody has access to food and water, and it's, it's this terrible hellscape where people are dying. Well, you want the generous friend to share their water and this kind of thing, right? So it's a little bit more complex, more interesting. Keep that in mind. Intermediate and above. So that was scaffolding. The doer of the action is the students, and the initiator, or the one who starts it, is the teacher. Okay. Now this category overlaps with many of our other categories, including scaffolding. Okay. It basically means using different techniques to help students produce output. Anything from a word they studied to their own ideas. Right? So anytime you make the student say something, that's eliciting. The teacher does it to promote output. The teacher initiates it. So you might say, hey S1, what do you think about the topic of global warming? So you're getting their ideas, you're getting their opinions, so yes, that's other interactions as well. But the teacher with his fishing pole is causing the student to say that, right? So that's going to be your eliciting. Could be memories, could be suggestions, could be anything. Eliciting. And yes, it overlaps with scaffolding. Fundamental part of communicative language teaching. We can elicit vocabulary, we can elicit complete sentences, etc., etc., etc. And this brings us to our final category of feedback. Corrective feedback. Any of these could be done with repetition. Any of these could be done with a whiteboard. Peer correction. S1, one of your peers said this. What do you think? Can you help her? Notice we don't say the other peer's name. This isn't time to shame anybody or to embarrass anybody. Self-correction. Hey S1, you said this. You want to try it again? Now you could do that with rising intonation on the problematic part. You said you go to the store? Okay, you could use the whiteboard for that. Anything to draw their attention to the error, because the studies show that students need to be involved in the negotiation of the error. Otherwise, that direct correction or recasting, when the teacher just tells them the answer, that's just input. We want them to process it, so that means encouraging noticing. That means encouraging negotiating that error themselves. Okay, that's corrective feedback. But not all of our feedback is corrective. Sometimes our feedback is saying, I hear what you're saying, and I see you did something good. Complimenting, hey, good job, well done. A lot of our TESOL students love complimenting. Everybody likes a compliment, right? Good job, well done. But be careful, because it can be not very meaningful. And if you use it too much, then it loses all meaning, right? If everything is okay, good job, good job, good job, then what is really good classroom behavior? Well, we also have productive praise. And productive praise is really cool, because that's when we actually notice and we indicate to the students, hey, you're doing this right. That is in line with our objectives for the day. It's very specific. It's something like, hey, Jihei, nice work connecting this quote to the relevant passage in the reading. It really shows that you're improving your reading strategies, which is one of our objectives, right? So that's productive praise. She feels good about herself, about something that she actually did in the classroom related to objectives. And then there's responding to meaning. Sometimes our students forget that, hey, when you're teaching students of English, they're using their language not just for right and wrong answers. They're using their language to communicate their ideas. So respond to them like a human being. Say, you've been to, I have been to Germany. You can say, wow, Germany, well, that's cool. What did you like about it? Did you enjoy it? Any differences from Korea and this kind of thing? And you can say, hey, I like Germany as well. That way they can say, hey, you know what? I'm really expressing myself with this language. As opposed to, you have been to Germany, next victim, etc., right? So these are our feedback techniques. The doer of the action varies. The purpose is to improve the quality of interaction, improve the rapport with your students.